Princess Ellene's 16th birthday began with silence. Not the soft, velvety quiet of dawn, but the heavy, suffocating kind. The kind that settled in the gaps between her parents' laughter as they bustled past her chamber door, their voices sharp with urgency. "The merchants from the Southern Isles won't wait, Aldrich," Queen Isolde was saying, her words clipped like the heels of her emerald slippers against the marble floor. "If we delay the negotiations, we risk losing the spice tariffs entirely." King Aldrich's reply was a rumble, half drowned by the rustle of parchment. Elline pressed her ear to the door, her breath fogging the polished wood. Maybe today, she thought. Maybe today they'll remember. They didn't. By midday, the palace was a hive of activity. Servants scurried through the corridors, their arms piled with silks and silver platters bearing delicacies Elline had never tasted. Candied rose petals from the Easter marshes, smoked eel glazed in honey, wine so dark it shimmered like liquid night. None of it was for her. She trailed a hand along the wall, her fingertips brushing the cool stone as she wandered into the throne room. There they were, her father, broad-shouldered and resplendent in his crimson doublet, his crown glinting like a captured sun, her mother, ethereal in a gown of gossamer and gold, her laughter ringing like wind chimes as a diplomat regaled her with tales of foreign courts. Elline lingered in the doorway, her own lavender dress, stitched with constellations she'd begged the tailor to embroider, suddenly feeling childish. "Look at me," she willed silently. "Just once, look at me." A servant nearly collided with her, a tower of goblets wobbling in his arms. "Apologies, milady," he stammered, not meeting her eyes. Elline opened her mouth to reply, but he'd already vanished down the hall. That night, the ballroom blazed with light. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the ceiling like frozen tears, their prisms casting rainbows over the swirling dancers. Elline stood at the edge of the crowd, her fists clenched in the folds of her skirt. She'd spent hours rehearsing what she'd say when her parents finally noticed her. Perhaps they'll apologize. Perhaps they'll ask me to dance. But the king and queen were too busy orbiting the room, their smiles radiant and empty, like coins polished for trade. When Elline dared to approach, her father's hand landed on her shoulder, a warm, absent weight, as he turned to a baroness and said, "You must try the saffron cakes, my dear. They're a recipe from my great-grandmother's time." Elline slipped away, her throat tight. The gardens offered no solace. Moonlight pooled in the marble fountains, and the scent of jasmine hung thick, but the statues lining the paths seemed to watch her with pity. She paused before the figure of a woman robed in vines, her stone face weathered but serene. Anara the Wise, the plaque read, "Protector of Alia, forgotten by time." Elline traced the words. "What did you do to deserve that?" she murmured. A breeze stirred the roses, carrying the faintest whisper. "The same as you, child. Loved too quietly." She didn't hear the footsteps until it was too late. "Princess." The voice slithered from the shadows, oily and sweet. Elline spun, her heart lurching. A man stood beneath the arch of wisteria, his cloak the color of a bruise. His face was sharp, all angles and hunger, and his eyes, gods, his eyes, glowed like embers in a dying fire. She knew him. Every child in Alia did. Malak Kar's likeness haunted tapestries and cautionary tales. The sorcerer who'd poisoned an entire court with whispers, who'd vanished a century ago into the forest of whispers, leaving only curses in his wake. "You're dead," Elline whispered. Malak Kar's smile widened. "And yet here I stand, drawn by the scent of loneliness. How it clings to you, princess, thick as perfume." He stepped closer, and the air turned cloying, like burnt sugar. Such a waste. A jewel ignored, left to gather dust while lesser stones gleam. "Stay back." Elline's voice trembled. She glanced toward the ballroom, but the music drowned her fear. "Or what? You'll scream?" He laughed, a sound like glass breaking. "They won't hear you. They never have." His hand flicked, and darkness surged. It coiled around her ankles, her wrists, her throat, cold and alive, squeezing the breath from her lungs. She thrashed, but the shadows held fast. Stop, please. A gift, Malak Kar crooned. If they refuse to see you, let them mourn the ghost you've always been. The world dissolved. When Eileen woke, the palace was silent. Dawn bled through the stained glass windows, painting the floor in fractured hues. She staggered to her feet, her head spinning. Hello. Her voice echoed, too loud. She stumbled into the corridor, past servants scrubbing wine stains from the tiles. None looked up. Excuse me. She reached for a maid's arm, but her fingers passed through flesh as though it were mist. The maid shivered, glancing around. Odd draft, she muttered, hurrying away. Eileen's reflection was gone. The days blurred. She learned to move through walls, to hover like smoke. She screamed until her voice cracked, through vases that shattered soundlessly, stood inches from her mother's face and begged. Nothing. Queen Isolde's tears, when they came, were for a daughter she'd failed to protect, not one she'd failed to see. We'll hold a vigil, the king declared, his jaw tight. The sorcerer's magic cannot last forever. It's not magic, Eileen wanted to scream. It's you. The statue in the garden became her refuge. Anna's stone eyes seemed to follow her, patient as the moon. One night, as Eileen slumped at the statue's feet, a voice rasped, "You linger here often, child." Eileen froze. The statue's lips hadn't moved, but the words hung in the air, crisp as autumn leaves. Who's there? Look closer. A crack split the statue's cheek, and from it seeped a wisp of silver light. It coalesced into the form of a woman, translucent, her features blurred at the edges, but undeniably alive. Her hair cascaded in a river of starlight, and her robes, though frayed, shimmered with constellations. Anna, Eileen breathed. The sorceress inclined her head. In the flesh, or what remains of it. You're a ghost? A memory? A shadow? Malak Kar's curses are creative. Her form flickered. He trapped me here after I tried to stop him. My body became stone, my spirit a prisoner. But you, she floated closer, her gaze piercing. You're different. He didn't just hide you. He made you a mirror. Eileen frowned. A mirror? For their guilt. Their regret. The spell feeds on absence. The emptier you feel, the stronger it grows. Anna's voice softened. But you're fighting it. I can see the light in you, struggling to break through. What light? Eileen hugged herself. No one's ever. Seen it? Anna smiled. They don't have to. The shadows fear it all the same.